This is episode number 22, the long form of Jamie-Lynn Sigler and I Have a Podcast. Yo, what is going on, everybody? I am Vinnie This is I Have a Podcast, and our guest on today's episode is none other than Jamie-Lynn Sigler. And in this special long-form episode of I Have that you are about to listen to, me and my team have taken the best, the funniest, the most impactful, the most honest sound bites from our interview with Jamie and compiled them into one gigantic, epic, extended play version of I Have, which I am extremely proud to present to you.
I knew nothing about podcasting. I had maybe gone on 2 or 3 friends' podcasts at the time. But what happened for me was I was pregnant with my second kid, and I became friends with this girl that we had a ton of mutual friends. We were Instagram friends, didn't really know each other, but we were both pregnant with our second kids at the same time. And we just started kind of, bouncing off our feelings about having a second child and this. And she oddly became somebody I felt really comfortable being very vulnerable with. And so through us then giving birth to our second kids and all of kind of the feelings and trials and tribulations, it made me think back to when I'd had Bo, my first son, and how hard it was. And I really struggled, but it was a time where mom culture wasn't the way it is now, where people are just really open and honest about things. Even 8 years ago, it was still a little highlight reel. You weren't going to share your issues with breastfeeding. You were embarrassed almost.
Yeah.
And, or just, that sometimes you didn't enjoy motherhood, which didn't mean that you didn't love your kid, but you were really struggling. And because I did so much of that alone and also didn't have many resources to tell me that I possibly was suffering from postpartum depression, I just thought I wasn't a good mom. So I was going to make sure that that wasn't happening again. So when I was talking about it with my friend Jenna and realizing that we had felt so many of the same things, her and I just really opened up deeply. And then part of the conversations would be hilarious and crazy. And one time I was up in the middle of the night nursing and scrolling back through our conversation. I wrote her, I'm like, these are fucking hilarious. And she's like, right? We should make a coffee table book. And I was like, well, maybe it should be a podcast. I mean, I know we're not reinventing the wheel and there's a lot of parenting podcasts, but I feel like our spin on it could be, let's talk about the shitty and the pretty of motherhood. Let's be really honest. Let's talk. We're two very different people. I'm an actress and you think I have this life and you are, and they think you have this life, but really, it's an even playing field when you're a parent. Your kid doesn't know you're a celebrity when they're born. They don't know that you have issues with this or you may be struggling with this. They're just babies that need you. And so that's where my first podcast, Mama Said, was born, was also really out of a need for me to talk about things. And so for 2.5 years, it was just an opportunity for us to grow as mothers. And, we had everyone from experts to other actresses to just friends of ours. And it really was such a beautiful experience, something I look forward to every week. And then because of it, we were able to kind of transition during COVID, where we were like, what other fun things can we do? And so we were homeschooling our kids. So then we made a little Instagram show called Are You Smart Enough to Homeschool? And we got sponsors and we're giving money to charity. But I always thought I was just an actor and that was it. So I think podcasting really was a platform for me to realize that I could be a creative and someone that could create things. I never thought I could do that.
But what was it about podcasting that somehow seemed maybe not easier or maybe more rewarding? I don't know. What was it about podcasting as opposed to the traditional way of writing a coffee table book or writing a script or some of the other traditional sort of media ways about them?
Well, I honestly, it was kind of messy and that was okay because it was just conversation. I mean, I was conscious of structuring the show so that our audience could know what to expect, which means, the opening would be, Jenna and I talking about how our mommy wins and mommy fails of the week. So where she was at, where does she think she won as a mom and where does she think she failed as a mom? And then I would go and then we would have our guest and we always allowed our guests to pick the topic. Because we felt like as long as you're passionate about what you want to talk about, then this conversation will flow. And then at the end, we would have something called Shitty Mommy, where we would make our guests share a story where they felt like a shitty mom or shitty parent, and they were super embarrassed, because then you realize you're not alone. And what was cool was then our listeners would write in and give us their shitty mommy, so we would share theirs as well. So it became like a conversation, and we had a relationship with our listeners, because through the podcast and then Instagram and then DMing us and writing us, it felt like we were building a community. And I feel like you don't really get that a lot of the time. And we started a Facebook page. So, it became like, if you listen to Mama Said, you were a certain type of mom, and they all found each other. And then we had like 10,000 members on Facebook. And then Jen and I stepped out, and then they were just chatting and sending each other. And it was just so cool to feel like, we might have been the catalyst for this, but like I said, it was just for us. And so it was like, it was messy in the way that it was just being honest and having conversation. It wasn't like, nothing was forced.
Yeah.
Aside from buying the equipment, and we would hire a producer to kind of put it out there, all we had to just show up with is ourselves.
So how do you prepare for a podcast differently than you would if you were on set as an actor, preparing to, play a character?
Well, as an actor, I mean, I'm really just worried about myself. I'm making sure I know my lines. I'm making sure I understand my character and her point of view and her relationships. And I show up, and then I fit into with everybody else, how I can, co-create with them, all of that kind of stuff. But podcasting for me, I was doing so much research on each guest. As soon as they would give us our topic, I would also do so much research on that topic, because at a lot of times, especially when you're talking about parenting, it can get, you can get deep into the struggle of things, which is great. But I also want to make sure that we're at some point living in solutions. So I would also heavily research solutions or advice when it came to this, because I wasn't expecting our guests to come in with that information. They were just going to be talking about an honest experience about it. But I always wanted to make sure that I had, even if it was just at the end of the conversation, to offer some insight, some advice, some resources, so that we weren't leaving just with leaving you with a heavy,
Story.
depressing story and then nothing with it. But then always ending it on the light with the shitty mommy. And we'd also then end with a Mama Said. So remember, Mama Said, and I at the beginning of it, I spent like 4 hours on the internet just searching all different quotes inspiring about parenting and this. And sometimes we would get them from just our guests and whatnot. And you'd leave on a high. I would leave on a high every time I would finish the episode. I would feel like we were learning. And to be honest, after the 2.5 years, we took a pause, and we're just talking now about starting up again, because I felt like we weren't growing anymore, as did my co-host. Because I think also in COVID, like 6 months in, it was hard on everyone in the quarantine and dealing with the pandemic. But when you were a parent as well, like, it was a real struggle. And I was having a hard time coming out of that. I was having a hard time finding the solution. I was having a hard time finding that happiness at the end of it. And as a show, that was our goal. And so to feel like we weren't growing anymore, and it was kind of just feeling like it was like, well, this week, I had to homeschool and it didn't go well. Like, I was like, we need to take a minute, because however long that needs to be. And I know our moms and our audience will understand. I think that's an important thing too, is to be self-aware enough to know, like, I'm losing track of the show right now and I need to take a minute. And that's the great thing about podcasting too, is you control when you put the stuff out, as long as don't have an ad person waiting,
Right.
you can take the pause and take the time.
Yeah. I can imagine, especially researching and goals or takeaway or just actionable steps that you want to make sure that you leave with the viewer, knowing that there is sort of that goal at the end of this conversation that also you've allotted time for, so you can emotionally get into, because that's part of the fun part. That's why we're storytellers and not just story writers. Like, that's why we choose to get. I can imagine that with a focus on the goal and the takeaway that during the pandemic, it would be difficult to deliver on takeaway and actionable pieces of advice because suddenly there is no place to research. No matter how much research you do, there is no finite recommendation or takeaway.
You know what's cool too is, so I have another podcast called Pajama Pants that I do with Robert Iler, who played my brother in Sopranos, and our friend Kassem, who has his own following from his YouTube channel from many years ago. And now he's the host on G4. And it's about everything and nothing. And if anything, it's not structured at all. It's like the opposite of Mama Said. And with Mama Said, we were at a network. We were at Podcast One. So it was built in, like the ad sale team, all that, like the whole structure.
Right.
But with Pajama Pants, no. We recorded in our friend's garage with no ads for the first year and a half, like just putting it out there. Then we started uploading on YouTube with video. Like it was a completely different experience. And what was cool about it was, I think because we were at a network with Podcast One, we definitely felt the pressure to we need to define our show immediately. We need to know who we are, say who we are. But with Pajama Pants, if you listen back to our first one till now, it's a completely different show. We allowed ourselves time to get to know each other, to get to know what this show was going to be about. And now we're kind of in our rhythm and we have our loyal listeners. They started a Reddit page for us. Like, it's so fun because it's a completely different side of myself too. I mean, I get to be the Jamie on Pajama Pants only there. Then that's it. Like, not even with my girlfriends or on set or as a mom or as a wife. Like, who I am with Robert and Kassem is just someone that's so different, and it's fun. It feels really creative, and like I feel like I'm wittier. I'm like, it's just like accessing a different side of me, but we get to be creative. And we also, because of the three of us and we have such different interests, we'll have Dr. Drew on because Rob wants to talk about, being sober and addiction. And then we'll have a UFO specialist because Kassem's obsessed with aliens, and then we'll have one of our directors from Sopranos on. Like, it's just been such a fun experience. And again, we just got an ad sale team and we're 2.5 years into this podcast. But I think the reason that we're sticking it out and that we're just starting now to make money from it is because we're enjoying it. And we've given ourselves the time to figure it out slowly and just put it out there. And now, we're talking about live shows and stuff like that. And it's crazy. You never think that you can create a legitimate business from this, but it's been so fun.
Yeah, just the act of creating. And again, like you say, with podcasts, you really don't know what direction they're going in. Suddenly there's a new platform, or like you say, even in touring, like when we're allowed to be in greater places, and when it's when it's recommended for more of us to be able to get into larger group spaces. I can only imagine how much fun it would be to get to watch you and Kassem and Rob in the same place doing what you do. That's like fun.
So fun.
And you're right. You do have that like your pajama. It's like pajama party, Jamie. It's like
well, we call it Pajama Pants because it's like we want it to be like reminiscent of when you were like in your sweats, your pajama pants, and like your parents' basement, like the random shit you talk about with your friends. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what it is. We're all over the place. But what's fun too was in Mama Said, as much as Jenna is a great conversationalist and she has like funny things to say, she's super honest. But for me, I really felt like my role was, like I said, watching the clock, keeping the structure. Like I ran the ship. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't have done it without her, but I was definitely the one running. And in Pajama Pants, it's Rob. Rob comes in with the notebook and he writes everything in Sharpie, and I just get to show up and just have fun with my friends. And it's nice to have that balance.
I love that. And it's so cool to see him being successful and creative and sober and strong. And like, I just love the energy you two are creating too.
Well, you knew him. I mean, you knew him you've known all the Robs too.
There.
And I'm so proud of him. I was actually saying this to somebody yesterday. That one of the reasons I'm so proud of him is not just because he's sober or anything, but what's really cool is that he's had a very consistent characteristic throughout his whole life since I met him when he was 12 years old. He does not care what anybody thinks of him. but in the best way. Do you know what I mean? Like he's not a jerk. He just, it doesn't matter to him. He has enough self-worth like for himself, and to see him still sustain that with his sobriety, and he's just curious about life, and he's the best. And I
Yeah.
just love, I think he's really found like a calling for himself. He's a really good host, and he's really funny, and he's really sharp, and he's really witty, and I hope he acts again, but he's a really good host.
When you went to go audition for Sopranos, sort of, is it true that it wasn't like you went with a song, you weren't prepared for the TV
Yeah,
show? Like,
I had no
that's like,
idea. Well, because they only had given the sides, meaning the script of what you were going to read. It was a scene with Meadow and Carmela, and she wanted to go skiing with her friend in Aspen, and she wasn't going to let her go. So I was like, yeah, that's a typical argument I have with my mother on the daily, that I want to do something she's not going to let me do. And it was for a show called Sopranos. So I didn't
yeah.
assume, I didn't know it was about the mafia. Like, how am I supposed to take that scene and know that it's about? So I assumed it was about singers.
You're
Uh,
like, I'm from Long Island. There's other words we use to indicate
that's
the
right. That's right.
mafia.
Exactly. Exactly. But yeah, that show couldn't have been done anywhere else but New York too, because you couldn't
Oh
have
yeah.
gotten the real accents and the real just authentic people. It was one of those shows that is so New York, so East Coast.
Yeah, I bet lunch and like crew services. It's so funny. I'm like, yeah, I want to work in the film industry. Craft services is like my thing. Like you
Oh
eat
yeah.
so well.
Oh my God. So well. Too well.
That is funny. And then when you look back then, did you ever think that you, as an actress, like as the way you're sort of trained to share your skill sets and your talents, that podcasting would be something that not only you would do but enjoy doing?
No, no. I would think you'd always have to be super private, that you don't do anything besides it. And to be very honest, I think that podcasting has only like enriched my acting, because I think that it's really allowed me to get to know myself a lot more and become more authentic. And in that process, you can only become more authentic in all of your creations when you're authentic yourself, and you
Yeah.
feel connected to yourself. And I think that comes with maturity and age. But for me, um for a lot of different reasons, I think I was always hiding a big part of myself. I was always figuring it out. And simultaneously around the time of all of the podcasts, was an opportunity. And I've said this to Rob and Kassem too, where I've sometimes like watched some of our YouTubes, and I'll look back, and to say this in like the best way, I was like, I enjoyed myself. And you don't get to do that a lot. You don't get to have a moment where you can appreciate yourself. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I've done quite the opposite my whole life, of just kind of really beat myself up or judge myself, or really felt like I always needed to improve. And I'm not saying that I don't need improvement. We all could, continue to grow and get better. But podcasting has allowed me to kind of sit back and just like appreciate who I am and all the hard work I've done. And I'm very grateful for that. I mean, my identity, my whole life was musical theater and singing, and it's still something that's super important for me. But because, of living with MS, I think in the physical limitations that I have, I kind of put that to bed, or thought that it wasn't going to be possible for me anymore. And I didn't sing for probably over 10 years, because anytime I tried to, I would cry. It was almost like this part of me that was grieving. And only recently I've kind of just been like, it doesn't have to be for anything. It could just be for me, that I've, started to kind of tap back into that a little bit. But then seeing people like Ali Stroker, and how amazing she is, there's I think that our world is really opening up to being inclusive in the best way. And I'm starting to feel like anything's possible
I
again.
love it. Well, by the, it's you talk about the physical demands of singing. It's fun. I laugh because like my picture of you singing is actually, I think, is the belly button commercial. That is like my favorite fact
Can you
about you.
imagine? I know that
That
is a fun
is like
fact
my
about
favorite fact about you. What was it in 2006?
me. It was
What was
Levi's.
Levi's, right?
It was
And you see
Levi's
the
low ride. And if you remember, yeah, it's the belly button singing, I'm coming out, and the voice is me.
I thought that was the best thing ever.
So fun.
These are and that's kind of like what I love about podcasting or having a vocal talent where you can record. You never know how it can be used or where it can be used or how additive it could be to someone else's project. So
Sure.
right, as a creative, we put so much pressure on ourselves to have the title, the project, all
Mhm.
of it worked out in our head. And it's interesting when you talk about being a creative and you instantly start talking about just the other people. Like you haven't talked about a podcast without talking about your co-host or the people who are helping you create it, whether it's at a corporation or in someone's basement. You're talking about acting. You bring your lines that you have to memorize, but other than that, there's 200, 300 people on set sometimes.
Mhm.
That's
That's what, well, I mean, I come from theater too. So it's, yeah, it's like the cast, the crew, we're all in it together. But I think that's also, I owe that to the Sopranos experience because, I had James Gandolfini and Edie Falco and Lorraine Bracco and these seasoned, incredible actors that I was learning not only that craft of acting from, but how to conduct yourself on a set.
oh
And
yeah.
these were people that looked at the crew as you're putting in the same hours, if not more than me. And you've got a family at home too. And I'm not going to come here and waste your time by not knowing my stuff, and like we're going to hang out in between at the crafty table. And, it was just such a like wardrobe, you're helping me build my character, and props, you're helping me know what's in my room, what's my character like. Oh, they like this music. Like, it's such a collaborative thing, and that's my favorite part about this job is like everybody's ideas just all coming together, and when it works, it's magic and it's lightning in a bottle. And I was on a once in a lifetime type of show that had all of that. And, I look for it wherever I can, even if it's not the whole thing, little bits of it, wherever, anytime I work, because that's what keeps me going. That's what's the best part. You can't do anything alone. To think it's all you is like, well, then it's not going to be very great. You've got to have everyone's vision. I love when I come to set and a director, completely blows my mind with a different take. And I'm like, I didn't see that, but another perspective, you can't see everything. I don't have an ego about it. I remember Gandolfini told me that once. He was like, when I talked about, maybe starting to work with an acting coach, and he's like, everybody uses a coach, Jamie. Doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing. Sometimes you just need other perspectives to help you build a character. Like, it has nothing to do with your skill or your talent. There's no ego there. Like, no one should do it alone. It should be collaborative. And I think that goes with anything creative. Yeah.
How do you prevent burnout with everything that goes on? How do you prevent burnout?
I don't know if you can, or at least
I love that answer.
I
Thank
haven't,
goodness.
I haven't figured it out. I mean, sometimes
You can prepare for burnout, but might not be able to.
I
I
think
love
that's
it.
more the thing is I sort of know what to do with myself when I get there, and I have the strength to be able to say, I need a minute. I don't feel bad about it. I just understand like that I need to be super honest with others and myself of the time that I need. Similar to kind of like what happened with Mama Said, you know what I mean? Being like, this isn't working and we're not enjoying it. I'm kind of being like, I got to prep for the show today. Like, that's not how I want to be doing this. And so I think it's just about being really upfront and honest about where you're at, what you're feeling, because you're not going to make good content. You're not going to be a good creator when you're burnt out. And nobody's going to go anywhere. I think it used to always feel like there was this race that if you didn't keep up or you weren't consistent or if you took a break, people would forget about you. And I think I've learned, over time that that's not true.
Yeah, and we've done a better job of being able to hold on to them, their interest and their access to them,
Yes.
and your audience isn't no longer contingent on what series you're on or the timeline of media. They're now able to sort of follow you and track you through your own sort of process.
Exactly.
So can we talk about Big Sky for a second?
Sure.
So congratulations on Big Sky.
Thank you.
I'm very excited. I want to know so going into, is it a lot of shoot days, and how are you preparing for it, and what can we sort of expect?
So, for people that maybe don't know Big Sky or fans of Big Sky, so it's I wouldn't say it's a procedural, but it's about these two women, female detectives, in Helena, Montana, and there's 2 to 3 sort of cases that they're investigating and solving per season, and they kind of overlap with each other, but there's still one from last year that's coming through this year. So there's a lot of new
Big
faces.
arc.
Big arc. There's new faces. There's same faces. So my character is a new case this year. I come and hire them because I think my boyfriend is missing. And it's just been a really cool opportunity. I'm playing somebody very different than I've ever played before. I don't know how much else I can say, but I shoot in New Mexico. And what I'm really enjoying is that, I live in Austin, Texas now. So it's an easy flight. It's like an hour and a half. And when I'm there, I'm there. And I'm fully focused on my work and myself. And when I'm home, and I'm fully hope. And because I used to actually really struggle with the mom balance of it and the guilt of being away. And I would feel like I was doing a half-assed job at both of them. And having something be on location has allowed me to just be like, I can't feel bad because I'm not there. Like I can sit here and feel bad and that's a waste of my time. So I'm going to, fully be creative here. I'm going to fully focus. And then when I'm home, like I said, as soon as I'm on the plane, I'm studying my lines again for the week. But when I'm home, I'm just here and fully present. It's been a really great opportunity for me to practice. I've always heard people say this, but I've really never lived it until now, is just be where you're at. And that's exactly what I'm doing.
And that's sort of clearing your head and giving yourself the space to fill it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's hard. It's great. It's actually wonderful when you acknowledge that you have 1 hour to do something and you don't have to look at your phone or check an email even, and just give yourself an hour to
I think that's something you do with podcasting. You're very present.
Yeah, you have
because
to
you know it's only an hour or whatever, like you're saying. So you don't feel the pressure to like you're missing anything. Like it's like when you work out, right? Or anything. You just put your phone down, I'm giving it this and I'll get to it after. Like, but it's nice to be that present. You don't get to be that present in many conversations in your life. Right? Because everyone's got their phone in their hand and things going on. It could ring, whatever. Yeah.
It's also wonderful. I mean, I really truly do like to think that like the thing that I'm working on, the thing that I'm doing or sort of putting my attention into in that moment is for me the most important thing that I should be doing in that moment. And that helps me actually feel valuable enough to come into a room, to be honest, with like even a friend, but a guest like you, and just because of your time, let alone, the stature and request, everyone else's requests. It's just that the time piece I know is so valuable to us.
Yeah.
And on this podcast, I actually go back and will drop in some takeaway so that I don't have to feel like I have to have that coming into it, so that I give myself the space to figure it out a little bit.
Yeah, that's great.
Because I might come in with like an answer or two and I'm like, well, where did I come up with that one? Thank God. And that's for me, this is like as much a learning process for me. Help me, like we all did this together by doing it together. So here I am again saying like, all right, so like, how do we show up on time? What are we using the mics? How's everything working?
I'm proud of you.
I like that part. Oh, I appreciate you. Thanks. And this is a big part for me. This is a big part of I got to work with people, and I got to work with brands, and I got to work with talent, and I got to work with companies. This is the way that I can no longer work with individuals and work with larger groups of people to inspire more creativity. All right, my last question for you is, okay, so are you as good as like memorizing like a speech as you are with like how does that like?
I have a weird talent. I have ability to memorize things very quickly.
That is awesome.
Yes, I'm very grateful for it.
It's visual. Do you say
very visual. Loud? I see it. I look at it. I see it. I see the page in my head, and then I make somebody say it with me, and I know I'll get it wrong, but within their correction is where it like clicks, and then it's done.
I love it. I'm like I'm learning. This is like my grasshopper move. So
but you don't have to know that.
No, I want to feel more confident at picking up on other people. I'm good at getting my words across. Some of those little tiny words that are so important, pronouns, verb, all that are so important now.
Well, what's also is a skill that I had to, really hone in on in podcasting is being able to ask a question and listen and know where I'm needing to go with the conversation and other questions I want to ask, but still making sure I'm listening and not already being like, okay, how do I get to that question? So for me, a lot of it was like studying the questions and like really making sure know deep in my soul so that, because believe it or not, the other question will always come up in somebody's answer. And so you'll be able to find the nuggets like within the conversation. And that took a while, and that takes a while. And it's an interviewer. I mean, I wasn't an interviewer, I didn't know how to do that. It's a skill.
I love it.
People do really well with that. I didn't.
Thanks for the nuggets, Jamie-Lynn Sigler.
I love you.
I love you so much. Thanks for listening to I Have a Podcast. For more information about today's episode, visit us at ihaveapodcast.com. If you like what you've heard, follow us or subscribe to be notified of our next episode. And we appreciate any kind reviews.